All right, well, my name is Wendy Cooler. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a member of Sandy Spring Friends Meeting, the Baltimore yearly meeting, and I am the convener of a project called the Friends Incubator for Public Ministry. This project is seeking to revitalize Quaker communities by engaging in the work of support and accountability for Quaker public ministers and for Quaker public ministry that comes out of our meetings. Jay Marshall is a member of our advisory board. He's also my old dean at Earlham School of Religion, where I lived in fear of him for a couple of years for apparently no good reason at all. He did not laugh like this when he was the dean. Um, at least not in my presence, he didn't. But he's a very active member of our advisory board that is working incredibly hard for the past 6 months to create a beautiful fellowship program for public ministers and their meetings. And I'm very indebted to Jay. I'm pleased to be here with him this evening to talk about his new book, Spice Up Your Life, Reflections on the Testimonies, that is, like him, incredibly deep and not as scary as I might have thought, and very funny and based in storytelling. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jay and let you introduce yourself a little bit.
Well, that may well be the only worst thing than having to listen to someone introduce me is now to introduce myself.
It's why I did it to you.
Yeah. Well, I am originally from North Carolina. People tell me I have an accent. I haven't noticed, but I hear it regularly. So if you wonder how to filter that, if you've got a Southern lens somewhere in your pocket, that might help. I grew up among FUM friends there. I was the son of a dairy farming family, and so have rural and agricultural roots. A call to ministry took me away from that, and it was that led me to college, ultimately to Guilford for my undergraduate work, and then to Duke for later degrees. Um, and then I've tried to be faithful and go where called, and that's been as a pastoral minister for several years, a seminary dean for 2 decades, and now just whatever good door opens and seems to be calling my name. So
Mhm.
uh, I I enjoy good coffee, if that matters. I started roasting as a hobby years ago and accidentally became a coffee snob. I rarely drink coffee that's not my own. I love the garden, and that keeps me connected with my agrarian roots. And I like to travel, and I do like to laugh. And I can't really tell you why, I just do. So that's a little about me. I'll be happy to answer other questions if you have them about who I am, but that'll start.
Mm. I have a story about you that I don't think you've ever heard because you're not really a character in it. It's about my fear of you. So when I was a student at Earlham School of Religion, I used to rent a house from Jay. The first couple of years I was there, I would rent a house that was near the property and it had white carpeting. And one day when I was walking back from ESR to this house, I stepped in dog poo, but I didn't know that I had. And then I tracked it all over the white carpeting. I just about had a stroke, actually. I was like, I am renting this house from my dean, and there's dog poop all over the carpeting. So I went to the grocery store and I rented a steam cleaner to clean the dog poop out of the carpet. And I was too afraid to even tell you that it had happened, but now it's okay.
Yeah, I did not know that. You must have done a very good job cleaning it up. It was not obvious to me. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, we're here to talk about your book, and how your book kind of connects to themes that, we find exist in public ministry. Um, and I think that the first thing that I'm curious about in your book is how you've carried humor and humility throughout all of the stories that are in it. And I wonder how you see laughter as a part of the spiritual life.
Well, I'm generally a good mood kind of person, and
Hmm.
I can't really tell you why, but laughter's come easily to me as long as I can remember. I do like to laugh. There used to be an administrative assistant at ESR who, when I would get ready to travel and be gone for a few days, would always ask if she could record my laugh so she could play it while I was gone. So I guess it's noticeable, but sometimes the atmosphere around friends can be so somber that I have on occasion wondered if, the wrong religious tradition took me home from the hospital, if I really belonged somewhere else because I wasn't serious enough. But I haven't been kicked out yet, so I guess it's working okay so far. But during my graduate work, my wife did some cross stitching to occupy her time while I was, buried in the library. And one of the things I have, it hangs downstairs in the house, but I have a framed cross stitch wall hanging she made for me, and it's a quotation from theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, and it says, "Humor is a prelude to faith, and laughter is the beginning of prayer." And I
Mm.
thought, well, that's one serious fellow. I mean, if he can say that and believe it is true, then surely it's okay if I hang on to my humor. Uh, but he had this idea that laughter had to be heard in the outer courts, and echoes of laughter should be in the sanctuary, but he drew a line at the Holy of Holies. He's sort of taking, the three sections of the temple there, but that in the Holy of Holies, that there laughter was swallowed up by prayer and humor
Mm.
was fulfilled by faith. And I don't know that I've ever or still fully understand exactly what he meant by that. But I think for me, apart from just being the way I seem to be built to run, that it also is helpful in that uh, it it gives you a way to deal with the inconsistencies of life, that when things don't fit the way you think they should, laughter is one way to begin approaching those inconsistencies. At least it sort of interjects a
Mhm.
pause for a moment while you sort of reorient yourself, gather yourself, and figure out, well, given this, now what? So that's one piece of it, and I guess I've also found that for those who weren't terrified of me, as Wendy seems to have been, or
Lots
ever
of us were
heard me laugh,
terrified of you, Jay.
that humor sort of relaxes people so that they're more open to the things you want to say and to communicate, and so they have worked for me in that way.
Hmm.
As for humility, I hope I am. I want to be, and to the degree I am, I think a lot of it probably comes from recognizing that I can't have all the answers, and if I don't have all the answers, I have to be open to what others have to say and think, and that just sort of takes me down a couple of notches, and I can be confident in my ability and confident in what I know, and still make space for others to have a different point of view, and so in that I
Hmm.
sort of am willing to become the student rather than the teacher in a situation.
Hmm. What you're saying reminds me of the proverb that man makes plans and God laughs.
Mm, yeah.
And it's making me think about how in Quakerism, The divine speaks directly to us through us, and that, maybe we can be the laughter of God.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I'm pretty sure I give God plenty to laugh at, and I hope that that's okay. Otherwise, um, I don't have much hope.
Yeah. I wonder when you think about the role of ministry in a Quaker community, how, maybe you have a story about this, how laughter, might play a role in how we hear or deliver, um, the ministry that's being presented to us.
Well, I think what comes to mind is thinking about my experience as a pastor
Hmm.
and Sunday mornings when you're given a period of time to where you're invited to bring the message that hopefully has come from the Spirit, but uh,
Hmm.
and how does one go about doing that? And there are various schools of thought on what a good sermon looks like, and many of them don't keep my attention for very long, particularly if they're um, just, I'm going to say mean spirited. I've not said that about a sermon, but I find that sort of stomping and snorting and yelling and condemning, even if it's true, doesn't keep my interest. But I have
Hmm.
found that storytelling and laughter creates a whole different dynamic.
Hmm.
And I had someone just a couple of weeks ago. I was invited to go back and speak at a place I had been 35 years ago.
Hmm.
And the first person I met, we were standing there waiting for others to arrive, and he said, "You know what I remember about the time you were here?" He said, "You're probably not going to like it that this is what I remember." And then he told a story that I had used in worship one Sunday. And he said, you probably don't like that. That's what I remember. And I said, the fact you remember anything I said after 35 years is fine with me. And you just confirm what I have come to believe, and that is that uh, good stories help these things stick. And you may not always know what I meant by it, but
Hmm.
getting you to remember anything. And so, places where I find I can use laughter and people give laughter back in response. I mean, to laugh in the middle of a meeting
Hmm.
for worship, uh, well, it's just a rich experience all around, and that for me is one way I see laughter helping in ministry. I'll stop with that. That may prompt another question, or maybe you've heard enough.
I don't know. I think, I've never heard enough. Um, but yeah, I mean, so what you're talking about with the role of laughter and humor in how we are remembered, how we convey messages, um, is making me think about the levity that laughter can provide to some of our conflicts. And a lot of ministry, of course, is about confronting difference, confronting harm in the community. Um, Prophetic messages can be, notoriously difficult to hear. Um, and we have this poster. I mean, like you and I are different types of Quaker. You're a program Quaker. You have been a pastor. I'm an unprogrammed Quaker. And while I travel extensively in the ministry, I am not a pastor. Um, And that you are a pastor and I am not is a result, in part, of a million little fractures inside of Quaker community, and a million different times that friends, in spite of our peace testimony, said, you know, I just can't even look at you anymore. We have to be something different. We have to go off and create something different. And I'm thinking about the distress that is caused in those types of conflicts, that have resulted in our, being different, being cousins, but being very different types of Quakers. And while you and I know that we exist, many times people in our communities are really unaware that other types of Quakers exist. And these ruptures just continue. They become finer and finer. And you see people leaving meetings and refusing to come back because they just don't know how to repair their relationships after a conflict. And that repair work is also the role of ministry. Ministry sort of creates fissures, and ministry heals fissures. And I'm wondering, you write in the book about peace being, in essence, disarming the distress caused by our differences. And I'm wondering if you have a story to tell us from your ministry when that kind of peace felt hard, but it still transformed a situation.
Well, I think peace is one of those parts of our tradition that we're proud of. But I also know about as many examples that didn't go well as I can name ones that did. So I
Mhm.
sometimes tell people we're better in print than we are in person. Um, but I don't know. I hope I don't really believe that, and I certainly know it's possible for us to do good work in that regard. And I think as you were speaking, what I was being reminded of was how much how many little pieces have to come together in order for peace to even be a realistic possibility.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is that it community, whether that's in a meeting, whether it's in your neighborhood, whether it's in your state, wherever it is, it takes work.
Mhm.
And you may not even recognize the work as it's happening, but the kinds of relationships that are born and nurtured that allow you to get to the point that you can have difficult conversations without dismissing the other or belittling the other. Um, I, just this week, Judy and I went to we decided to go bowling one afternoon, just looking for a little activity and to get out of the house. And so we go bowling, and beside us there's this group of teenage guys bowling. They've got chaperones. Um, they're having a good time. They're kind of loud, but when they would get frustrated, they would look for names to call each other. And I just learned a new one. I don't know that I'll ever have cause to use it, but he called his friend a a chicken livered sauerkraut, and I don't even know what that's supposed to mean, but that was the best insult he could come up with at the moment. A chicken livered sauerkraut. But when I was the story I'm thinking of at the moment, when I was dean at ESR, um, we put a lot of time in developing faculty relationships. Uh,
Mhm.
I had a little money that I could use for that purpose, and I would organize trips related to the mission of the school and invite faculty to go. I didn't require anybody to go. I didn't think I had that authority. But if we're going to offer you an opportunity to go to England for 2 weeks to rediscover our Quaker roots with John Punchin leading the tour, most people were easy to convince. But the nice thing about that is between all those stops of Quaker meetings we wanted to see were hours bouncing around on a bus with our colleagues, not in our office, not in our home, not
Mhm.
where we could hide. And over that time, the relationships it built meant when we got back into the classroom or back into the faculty meetings, we could discuss all sorts of stuff we didn't agree on, and we could do it respectfully, and we could find a way forward. And even if at the end of it all we still didn't agree, we had fundamental differences on what we thought about it. It didn't splinter the group and lead us into destructive paths.
Mhm.
When I was and that would take work, I think. Early in my time in Indiana, I wound up being clerk of Indiana Yearly Meetings Ministry and Council, and or Ministry and Oversight. I think we called it Council in North Carolina, Ministry and Oversight. And not long after that, the yearly meeting informed us that we had to take a statement they had approved on around the subject of sexuality that was controversial within the group. And in the group, on the committee that I had to clerk, we had everyone all across from the left to the right, polar opposites, everything in between. And we were told we couldn't change the position, but we had to create a ministry statement. So we had
Mhm.
to find a way to say something positive and useful that meetings, when they were needing to deal with those situations, had some guidance from the yearly meeting. And trust me when I say that what we came up with did not mean that we had all united and that there was peace among us because we all believed the same thing. But there
Mhm.
was a peace among us that was possible as distress lowered over a period of a year or so, because we met and we talked and we talked and we met and we went on and on and on. And finally, when we had to present that to the yearly meeting for their consideration and approval, at just, I hope, a moment of inspiration at the last, I decided to ask the whole committee to come sit on the front stage with me while I presented that.
Mhm.
Not so much because I felt like uh, I needed support, but because I wanted people to see who was involved with it,
Mhm.
and said to the group, I know a lot of us don't trust one another. Some of you don't trust me. Uh, I may not trust you, but just look on the stage, and I bet there's somebody on this committee you do trust, and just know that they felt like after all the work we did, this was a right statement for us to come forth with, and with that confidence in that person, you know, sit with that and consider whether or not Spirit might call you to approve what we're presenting. And the process went forward without any angry words, without a whole lot of discussion. People were generally accepting that because of good process. Did it mean that peace came because one of us prevailed in convincing the other? No.
Mhm.
Uh, but but it did prevail because the distress we felt and then sometimes projected on others as being the cause of was alleviated because we did the work that helped us come to understand other things that helped us see that differently.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's answering the question you're asking or not, but it's what I have at the moment.
No, I think that's a really it's a really important example, I think, of peacemaking. Um, and I found, we were talking a little bit before this call about experiences I've had where um, the expectation is that if I'm a good person, I will reject being in relationship with certain people. That the culture around us, um, I think, really emphasizes. It's very much like the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. the peace that comes from empire, the peace that comes from overpowering others. And so, whatever empire we think is the empire of goodness must prevail and control the bad people. And I don't see that working out for us. And so, I'm deeply concerned with our relationships and have made tremendous personal sacrifice as a public minister to facilitate better, healthier, and more just relationships between those of us in the religious society of friends. And time again, those sacrifices are ignored when I just don't choose to write someone off that is felt to be in the wrong on something. And I don't, it really concerns me that we find it difficult to stay in labor with each other. I think staying and ignoring a problem, staying and ignoring injustice is not the same thing as being in real relationship with each other. But staying and laboring and finding ways of facilitating that and working with other people, moving us closer and closer to the divine and to the light, I think is the purpose of our community. And I think, you're speaking to that in that story.
Well, it's a diverse world we live in, and any idea that we can line that up so that we all become uniform and similar. That's an unrealistic assumption to begin with. Even if it was a good idea, I think
Hmm.
it's unrealistic. And so, given that differences will continue to exist, um, there's one level of difference in conflict that emerges just because of someone's different than what we know or practice. That you know, we can go a long way toward eliminating that by lowering the distress, by not being threatened by the difference.
Mm.
I mean, there comes a level where we move into a range of topics where it may not be quite that simple as just my learning to accept, the differences. Sometimes change needs to happen, and that could be more difficult. But boy, a lot of what tears families and communities apart uh, is often of that other category, which really is just because you never stop to believe it could be different than the way you did it.
Hmm. Hmm. I feel like, to take us back to the spices, which is sort of the framework of your book. I feel like, humor for me is kind of an example of simplicity. It's like, it's an example of kind of getting down to, what is basic to us. Um, and I'm thinking about, the joy we have the first time a baby laughs. And the simplicity of that proverb that, we make plans and God laughs. There's a simplicity in the wisdom of that. And, you were talking about peace, and a deeply complicated piece in the story that you just told us. It's uncomfortable. And it involves our learning how to trust each other and trust in the relationships that we have with each other, in the love that we have for each other, and maybe not focus on our ideas of the world, but on our relationships with each other, our experiences of each other. And, the next letter, of course, is I. And not to sound like an episode of Sesame Street and go through the spices one by one, but I will. So I hear some themes around integrity in that story, and integrity being wedded to vulnerability. And I wonder if you see us sometimes being more concerned with appearing consistent than actually being faithful.
Well, I think a lot of what I hear in the news media, not to get into politics or go one side or the other, but uh, there's a place where often attention seems to be given to appearing to do the right thing, appearing to say the right thing, sort of along the lines of what you were describing. Whereas the the foundation, the content, the perspective behind all of that seems to be missing or warped or out of alignment. I
Mm-hmm.
I I like integrity because integrity helps build trustworthiness. Uh, I
Mm-hmm.
can't I can't quite figure out how a community has a firm foundation or good interconnectedness if it can't trust the people it's in
Mm-hmm.
relationship with. And so I don't put forth integrity um, as a set of standards I've already decided that you need to carry like a checklist and be able to demonstrate that you've kept those and become concerned. It's like being in a class and being overly concerned with the grade instead of the learning.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to learn from life and see how that uh, fits with and how those lessons might change how we've seen the world or what we think we need to do next. But I think that integrity is about, at its best for me, is about an alignment between the things we've come to hold are as true and the way
Mm-hmm.
we expend our energy and represent ourselves and work for good or God or however one wants to describe what one works for. But the integrity is about being true to the things that matter, the things you've chosen to
Mm-hmm.
value. That leaves a lot of room for you to work out what it is you decide. So, we're not imposing a quick standard. We're just saying that alignment, that consistency. Even if I don't wouldn't choose the same things you do, at least if I know what you stand for, then I ought to be able to have a reasonable conversation and think about the things we need to think about together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, as we're kind of doing this exercise, I'm having this thought that sort of one testimony leads to the next. And I'm not a big fan of the SPICES acronym. I think a lot of us that are deeply engaged in the Quaker world feel a lot of criticism of having who we are reduced to this thing that was used in some of our private schools to, you know, sort of neuter us, actually, and teach non-Quakers who we are in some overly simplified way. Um, but I feel like one of the things your book has done for me, because I never talk about the spices, never, um, because of that concern. Um, and I think one of the things your book has done for me is it helped me to be more open um, to um, this way of thinking about ourselves, like as sort of an exercise um, in asking ourselves questions about how we are in the world and telling stories back um, to this exercise in identifying, what we value, and what our lives are about, what is giving us meaning, and how we're coming together. Um, and I see how, the simplicity of laughter, the peace that comes from building a trustworthy religious society of friends. Johann Maurer talks about the trustworthy church sometimes. And I think a lot about, trustworthy meetings as a result of that. And that real peace, I think you're saying, comes from that trustworthiness. And that integrity is not about having a list of things that we do or don't do rigidly, but it's about being sort of morally consistent and having being able to explain ourselves to others, and being able to be a non-anxious presence inside of a conflict, inside of difficulty in our meetings. And I see how those three things now actually do lead to community. Um, and I wonder in your vision of community where public ministers fit in. I mean, this is a conversation that is about that is for the incubator for public ministry. And I'm just wondering, like, in a world where so many of our meetings have forgotten about the practices that support and hold public ministers. What does it mean for a minister to be in community?
Well, I think if I may, I'd go one step further back
Mm-hmm.
before I got to the public ministry piece. I mean, this it sort of leads to it for me, and say that I hope, I mean, rather than this book sort of trumpeting an acronym,
Mm-hmm.
it makes for a curious title. You know, I like I like that. Um, but what I hope this book models, what I hope the stories model, is is a practice of going through life with introspection in hand. That as we go through day-to-day events, that we're sort of motivated by some of those basic Quaker pieces of believing that there's that of God in all people, that life is sacramental, that every bend we turn is the possibility of a new discovery of opportunity for experiencing the divine, or an opportunity to act and to offer what may well become ministry. And where I think friends have, and not just friends, I guess, but uh, many of us have sort of been overrun by an approach to life that never really goes deep that way. Everything is at the surface. Everything is seen sort of one
Mm-hmm.
dimensional, and we react based on probably our mood for the day rather than asking other questions about what might be required, what might the Spirit request of me. And so, if that becomes our way of operating, and we carry that into the way we worship and do business, then we're probably going to stew about whatever's on our minds during worship, and we just may not be prepared to sit with and answer the questions that come to us from people who are looking to the community for the guidance the community supposedly uh,
Mm-hmm.
is designed to provide. And one of the reasons I like the Spice testimonies. I mean, growing up as a Quaker in the South, which was mostly Baptist and Methodist territory, means that they all had a they all had a handy list of what they were supposed to
Mm-hmm.
believe and do, and we didn't, and it wasn't because all things were go, but we just had to work it out a different way, and so spices to me was sort of the closest we came to that. And what I liked about it, and still like about them, is that they're value oriented, they're character
Mm-hmm.
building, and they arose out of worship together. And I don't think it was that friends set out to say, "Oh, we need a list. Somebody, let's start a list. What is it? What is it we believe?" Uh, but when problems emerged and solutions were tried, and things begin to work, and the community tests those and they adopt them, and they become part of who we think we are and what it means to be faithful, That's the question we're trying to address, I think, is what does it mean to be faithful? And if you live that
Mm-hmm.
introspective life and you're seeing the divine around you and at work among us, then there will be times when we will probably sense that some of the work to be done is ours, or
Mm-hmm.
that the Spirit is calling us something we've not yet thought about.
Mm-hmm.
And so, do you just run by your ticket and hop on the bus and go, or do you talk to a trusted friend and say, "So this just happened. Help me think
Mm-hmm.
about this." Uh, and the community has to be ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
And if they agree that that's your number that's been called, that this is your work to do, how do they support that? How do they
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that? And we have rejected many forms of validation or affirmation, and with some good reasoning behind that. But it sort of leaves those who are called sort of grasping for answers of how do I think about myself? Where do I fit? I had early in my time at ESR a group of unprogrammed friends who were identifying themselves as public ministers. Came to campus. We had a weekend conversation where we just talked about those things, and their sense was that uh, they were ministers. They'd been called to do what they wanted to do, but they were trying to operate in an environment where there was no language for what they were. There was no place for them
Mm-hmm.
in the organization, no place for them to have a voice. And so some of the frustration that came out of that, uh, there's always two sides to every story, but at least part of it was they weren't even sure where to have the conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't good language to talk about it. So I I can't claim to fully understand why there's such a resistance to the idea of ministry within a religious group that some of us still claim Christian roots. Others may have left those behind, but we're still a religious body that seems to think having a spiritual dimension to our life matters somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work carry on, and how do we help those who are trying to answer those questions? So community responsibility looms large there, and we're much better prepared for that if we have uh, if we're living and practicing that more introspective path in life that has learned that this life we live is this grand mix of human action, human perception, and hopefully uh, divine movement.
Mm-hmm.
I may
Mm-hmm.
be rambling now, so I should stop.
No, that was great. I'm just going to take a minute with that. I'm thinking about what happens in a community where we say we're all ministers, um, but we really mean none of us are ministers. And like that doesn't feel like a trustworthy religious community, to claim ministry and then reject the presence of ministry.
Mm,
And I'm thinking about the consequences of sort of like the lived reality versus the claims we make about ourselves. And the way in which I'm so tired so much of the time as a result of living into a call to ministry for I, I, I can't believe it's been as long as it has been, but it's been like 14 years that I
mm,
have been engaged in full-time public ministry. And The Friends Incubator for Public Ministry it exists because of the hunger that so many feel inside of our society to make real our calls and to make real these calls in the context of our communities. It's really an effort to labor with our communities about what we say we are versus how we have experienced who we are. Um, and I'm thinking about the exhaustion that I experience and that so many people with a full-time call feel inside of this context where we have not proven ourselves yet to be trustworthy as a community that holds ministry. And I wonder if you have any wisdom in the book. I know I have a quote here somewhere. Ah, here it is. This is the quote that's really haunted me. You talk about the freedom of an uncluttered life. And if it wasn't you saying that, Jay, I would have just put the book down. Um, because I feel like I have been told so many times to just give up and go home by people who said that they loved me and that that was an example of an uncluttered life, that I could somehow go home and sit in a warm bathtub with a candle and practice self-care and maybe clean out my cabinet so I don't have, so much loose Tupperware. And that this is wisdom according to popular culture. This is what, entire magazines are devoted to. And Quakers read those magazines just as much as anybody else does. And so, like, as soon as someone starts talking about an uncluttered life, I just feel like, what do you mean an uncluttered life? I have values, I have things I need to accomplish in this world. I just start to growl. But it was you saying this to me. And to go back to trust, I trust you. You have earned my trust. We've known each other now for like 10 years or something. It's ridiculous. I think I met you, it hasn't quite been 10 years because I started at ESR in 2016, but almost,
Hmm.
almost 10 years. And so when you say that to me, I know you don't mean go sit in a nice warm bath and enjoy yourself.
No,
So
but
what
if
do
you're going
you
to start,
mean?
if you're going to start cleaning cabinets when you're finished, I'd like for you to give me a call. Maybe I can hire you to come. Um, no, that's a good question, and I don't mean to be trite with the language about uncluttering, but I think it's one of the places where simplicity starts to teach us how to free ourselves for ministry, I think. Um, and it's not because you're with the bath and candles, so if that's your thing, that's fine. I mean, I wouldn't discourage baths, and I don't care whether you have candles. So, um, but the thing about the uncluttering and simplicity for me is that a lot of the thing, I mean, we just add stuff to our lives all the time. And we do it without thinking sometimes if it's important or not, or how does it rank with others? Maybe they're all important, but some may be more important than others. But if we just keep stacking on and stacking on, there's only so much time and we only have so much energy. And so sometimes it's about sitting with these various pieces long enough to figure out which of these are most important, which of these do I value most, which of these feel like ministry, and which are what somebody else has decided I should do. And if we can start to make those evaluations, let some things go. Doesn't mean they're not good things; they're just not your things. I had
Mhm.
my wife and I decided when we were married that we were not going to have children. We like children. We just both knew we had calls to ministry that we thought were important, And there were some really important things we couldn't quite work out if there were children in the mix, like on Sunday morning when we go in opposite directions and a kid's sick, who does what, just things like that. Then we just decided that we'd be good aunts and uncles. We were not going to be parents. And I remember there was a person I respected very much in the meeting at that time, and he said to me one time, he said, I really wish you'd have children. He said, you would just make such a great dad. And I said,
Mhm.
I know I would, but that's not my work to do. And
Mhm.
so it would have been fine if we had changed our minds. I think I would have been a good dad, but it wasn't what I felt was my work to do in the time I'd been given, and it wasn't work I particularly wanted to do. So with a congregation full of people or a seminary full of faculty and students, sometimes you feel like a parent who's got too many
Mhm.
children you can't discipline properly. So, yeah, I don't need two more. Um, but all that's to say, I mean, just an example of there are lots of things that we may have the opportunity to do, but they're not all the things that we're right to do or that is
Mhm.
best for us to do. And so simplicity, that decluttering bit, if we're able to let go of the things that might not be our work to do or might not be as important, then perhaps we'll free up more space to do the things we need to do. And so I don't know, maybe that's like trying to rid all these unused apps or files off your computer. You create more space to do the work you need to do. But
Mhm.
but it may be more difficult when we're talking about ministry uh, for a couple of reasons. One, if you're underfunded, as many ministers are, particularly in the unprogrammed tradition, not that program friends are making it rich, but if you're underfunded, then this ministry work has to be on top of whatever else you
Mhm.
do to put food on the table and a roof over your head, etc. And that's an overextension that it's hard to get out of without the structure, without the system you're working in, recognizing it has a responsibility.
Mhm.
And so, that's a question that I know meetings don't like to wrestle with, but it's I think it's legit. Um,
Mhm.
and also when we're talking about ministry, even if you have the funding you need, if you're answering a call, it doesn't feel like work. I mean, you just go and go and go. And I used to tell people I did work hard, but I also played hard, so which
Mhm.
meant that I was more than willing to take time away. Every day of vacation, ESR offered me, I took, and when I
Mhm.
was on vacation, I left. I did not come to the office. I didn't call in and see how things were. I was going overseas one vacation, and someone said, who's in charge when you're not here? And I said, I am. And they said, well, what do we do if such as I said, look, you all are competent people. That's why I hired you. You know how to do your job, do it. And if you have a conflict, you know how to work it out, do it. And if you can't work it out and you have to call me and pray. And they said, well, what, the building burns down? I said, don't call me, call 911. I can't do anything about it. All you're going to do is ruin my vacation. I'll find out soon enough. So we love what we do, but we also, I mean, there is some value to self-care, but it doesn't require a spa day every 2 days. So I don't want to tell you not. It is important to take care of ourselves. Um, it's okay to work hard, but you need to know your limits and you need to understand um, how it is you recharge and how it is you're renewed. And I think that for those of us who feel called to public ministry, it's really important in the process to realize that we are we are one minister among others, even even if the others haven't realized that. We are one minister among others, which means we are not the only one to solve the problem. We're not the only one responsible for the problem. So stick to your convictions about ministry as friends talk about it, and try to hold us accountable to the things we say we believe. That we are
Mhm.
all ministers in this together. And I think it's equally important to stay grounded with our guide. And that sounds trite, and maybe it is, but sometimes it's hard work. Uh, but to stay grounded with our guide helps us stay focused on the things that are ours to do. And I think it also helps us not assume that it's all our work to do. And then, as much as possible, try to keep the wider picture in view. You know, it's sort of like in the moment, everything's a crisis, but if you back up and look at the bigger picture, well, it's still
Mhm.
a thing that needs to be dealt with, but it's not as important as it looks when it's the only thing on the screen.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's helpful, but I can tell you, even knowing that, boy, when I retired, I was tired. I mean,
Mhm.
I tell people I'd get up in the mornings and I'd fix me a cup of coffee. I'd go sit on the front porch and I'd just sit there in quiet and I'd think and I'd pray and I'd meditate and I'd drink coffee and I'd do that for about 4 hours and I'd get up and have lunch. And it took several months before that started reducing slower and slower and slower. I still get up and have coffee first thing, but I'm usually working on a project, writing or something, instead of just sitting there numb. Um, so it took a while to recover.
Yeah. Now you have this pesky former student who's put you to work too.
I know, and she doesn't pay very well either. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No, it's true. I don't pay you at
Well, it
all.
is, but I don't care.
Well, you somehow magically brought us to equality. You're doing such a good job. If this were Sesame Street and we were to go through the spices one by one, you were talking about us being equally called to ministry. Like, are we serious about that? Are we equal in our ministries? And so often in the unprogrammed world, which I feel like I can speak to, and maybe you can speak to the programmed world, but in the unprogrammed world, the minute you start talking about having a ministry, people think that you believe yourself to be better than others, that you're running for Pope of the Quaker world, and that they need to stop you from doing that. Instead of it being an expression of what we all are carrying, some kind of ministry. And, when you were talking about, your idea of an uncluttered life, maybe involving self-care, but not being limited to that, I feel like you started to say something about the obligations of meeting. If we really mean that we're all ministers equally, how are we creating an environment where we make that real? And I'd be really interested in, how you can imagine us making that more real than we have today based on where we are.
Well, there are a handful of allergies that Quakers have, and leadership is one, authority is one, and I guess ministry is too. And for whatever reason, we have picked up pieces of our story that talk about the difficulties for early friends had with things as they were practiced, and we've just sort of made that a universal monolithic response to anytime the subject comes up. Um, so I don't know where it started, but I think there is on the program side. Our issue is often, well, we're not all ministers. That's why we hired one. We pay them, they do the work. We just tell them when they don't do it right. And so um in some ways, I guess it goes all the way back to the question of what is the church's purpose anyway, or what are we seeking when we come together, whether it's for worship or committee work or fellowship meals or what have you. What why do we do this? Why is it here? And I mean, you could certainly have groups that provide social connection without any ounce of spirituality to it. I mean, there are all sorts of service groups that do that, and you don't have to do that here. But I think asking why we're here may be part of the answer to this question. But I think we have this practice of uh, counting on queries to help us find our way to the truth. And it seems to me like maybe we need a good set of queries asking us the right and the difficult questions uh, about ministry and about our part in it, or about meeting responsibility, and sit with those.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and once that's done, talk about it and keep talking until we come to a better place. Uh, I don't I don't think that I don't think we argue our way to a new answer on this. The
Mm-hmm.
one thing I've noticed whenever I sit in and I listen to a religious group, usually a meeting, sometimes a church, it's a different denomination, and I listen to them wrestle with whatever the latest hot issue is. And they can have the best outlined arguments in the world. They could document their position. They could have a convincing presentation, and when it's all over, it doesn't change one mind because they've
Mm-hmm.
reached a point where logic no longer matters. It no longer, well, it's not that it doesn't matter. It doesn't drive the discussion. It doesn't move the
Mm-hmm.
needle. And I have seen that. I mean, just one of the clearest examples I can think of is around the subject of sexuality. I have sat with grandparents who are wrestling with the fact that their child, someone they love, has made a decision about their orientation that doesn't sit well with them, and it's against everything they've ever believed. And if they've been part of discussions before, they would not change their opinion for love nor money.
Mm-hmm.
But when this is about their grandchild, and it might be the difference between staying in a relationship or losing that relationship, their hearts start to melt, and their position begins to change, and suddenly they may not even understand why, but they move to a new position where they can now start going down a different path because the people involved matter more than the position they thought they held. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think back to the meeting question, uh, I think we could talk about Quakers and our history and how ministry was a part of that, and it needs to come back, etc. And we can clean that presentation up and have the nicest, tightest argument in the world. And I imagine most folks would still go out and, oh, that's all well and good, but it takes something that moves the heart instead, which is why I think queries in the spirit might get us there,
Mm-hmm.
but weeping and wailing probably won't. So, uh, how to get a group to undertake that? Um, that may be the unanswered question at this point. But my hope is that part of what we're doing with the incubator, where someone in their congregation, in their midst, needs to answer this question, needs help wrestling with these matters, and
Mm-hmm.
because of that personal connection, you might see a willingness to try a new thing. And
Yeah.
once you try it, um, it may be that the doors will open a little wider. So we'll see.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we've got one spice left. It's the newest spice, the S at the
Mm.
end that made it plural. We have many spice. We have spices now, and that is stewardship. And you say something in the book that I think really points to your humility. Um, and I just want to read the quote to you. You say, "Perhaps I am to be a conduit, not the final destination." Um, I wonder how you think that that quote might speak to meetings who are trying to support a ministry, but they find that they have very limited means.
Well, I think that quote came out of a section where, in thinking about stewardship, I was thinking about the choosing enough over more, and
Hmm.
and that if you can identify what enough is, then the rest of it is more that you don't necessarily need, and so it's disposable, and so it's shareable. Maybe that's a better word.
Hmm.
And so things that have come your way. I mean, I tried to raise money once from a guy. I didn't succeed. He was a Quaker, let me just say that. So don't want
Oh.
things. Uh, but he had made so much money in business. I mean, he had done so well, and we were going to lunch one day, and he was telling me that he had ordered this new top of the line Mercedes, and it was on back order, and he just couldn't wait for it to come. And in mid sentence, he sort of stopped himself, and he said, I could have ordered the cheaper model and given the rest away, but I don't know. I just want this one." And um, we had a few conversations about what that attitude might might say. Maybe that's why I didn't succeed in the fundraising. But some
Hmm.
things you just can't pass up the opportunities uh, to try and make a point. But um, so if we when we begin to be content with enough, then the amount that we have to have before we feel safe and secure changes. So maybe we actually are able to support, even though we think we don't have enough. Um, and the other thing is that a lot, especially when we're in community, there are often hidden resources, and I don't mean dollars. There are hidden resources there we just may not be aware of because either A, we've never talked about it, or maybe the person who has it would part with it, but nobody's ever asked. And
Hmm.
so, boy, so much of this tonight just goes back to the types of warts and blemishes that occur when you stop talking, when you stop having meaningful conversation. Because there are a lot of resources that a meeting that might feel like they financially don't aren't in a place to support a ministry. Maybe that's not what that minister needs at all. Maybe they just simply need an accountability group. Maybe they need an affirmation. Maybe they need advice and wisdom that you've got plenty of, even though you have you know a tiny balance in the checkbook. So first of all, we should just realize there are lots of ways. There are lots of ways to be supportive, and two, if we're clear about what we need versus um, what rainy day we're saving for just in case, we may free up a lot of financial support that could go toward causes that are going to make a difference for the meeting, for the neighborhood, maybe for the world. Who
Hmm.
knows?
Hmm. Thank
I'm
you, Jim.
really
Okay.
I've been all over this enough thing for a while now. I think it started I wrote about the yard sale we had when we condensed. That was an eye opener. But even in I think you know, Wendy, most people will, and I have wound up doing some retirement planning for folks in my retirement and trying to help them figure out how to make things work. And I tell them, if your only goal is to get more and more and more, I said, I'm not your guide. Let's don't waste each other's time. I want to help you figure out what's enough. And then
Mm-hmm.
let's see if you have that. And if you don't, let's find a way to get it. And if you do, then let's make sure you don't lose it.
Mm-hmm.
So what's true, what's true of those budgets, I think is true in some of these conversations around ministry. Um, you in a meeting not long ago, you used the image of the stone soup, and that's sort of the way friends meetings often work. Is that we don't think we have anything until we start revealing the one thing we have in our cupboard, and then next thing you know, lunch is served, and it's pretty tasty. So
Mm. I really enjoyed this, and I want to make sure that people that have come to this talk have an opportunity to ask questions that they might have for you. I don't know if they've come having read the book or about to read the book, but I think all questions are welcome. And if you don't want to be on the recording, you could just send me a message, and I will read your question to Jay. You can also just unmute yourself and talk if you're comfortable with that.
I have a question.
Okay, Susan?
Um, I finished reading the book this afternoon, and it was just perfect for where I am spiritually and interpersonally right now. I really thank you for it, Jay. One question that I had was that it didn't seem to me that you spoke much about testimony as a corporate manifestation of Quakerism. uh, I haven't been active in a Quaker meeting in a long time, but my recollection is that my fellow unprogrammed liberal friends often spoke about their commitments on current political issues as examples of our lives speaking or our testimony to the world. And your book wasn't about that sort of thing at all
mhm.
that I could see. In fact, the few times that you touched on contentious political issues, it was more about people listening to people who they disagreed with or who were coming into the situation from a different angle. I wonder if you could say something about the Quaker history or present state of corporate testimony.
Yeah. Well, I like the way we tell the story about the origin of these testimonies. Even though I have not read minutes, if they exist, of how those discussions were labored with corporately, and when was there a sense of the meeting that integrity is going to be one of those. Uh, but somewhere out of the practices, these become identified and recognized and maybe expected by the body on its members. But the thing I used to joke about this, but it was sort of a joke, but there was seriousness to it as well. It's like, well, there were started out there were four. Where'd community come from? And I now know where it came from. Who decided stewardship gets to be added? And then there's two or three others that are floating around. And I said, Quakers, given our structure, we don't really have that I know of a documented path for something to sort of be it's not like changing the Constitution where so many states have to approve it, And so I just one day it magically happens. Uh, I remember someone asked me one time whether as Dean of ESR, they wanted me to declare October something to be World Quaker Day. And I said to them, I don't think it's a bad idea, but I don't have the authority to make that proclamation. Well, apparently somebody did, because a few years later, we're having World Quaker Day. And more power to them, but I didn't think that was my work to do. But all that's not my work to do, but I didn't have that kind of authority to speak for the whole Quaker world that this Sunday is it, folks. And so I don't think there's a lot of work that I'm aware of that goes on across with all of Quakerism involved, which is what I would think we would need if we were going to collectively decide this is a new testimony, or we're going to strike this one. We're tired of this peace business. It's not working for us. So I just don't see that structure. I see that kind of work, deliberate work going on in yearly meetings, but hardly beyond. Or maybe there'll be a workshop at an FGC or an FUM session. But so I don't know that we're doing good corporate work on that, and I don't really. I mean, I personally, I'm not sure this is what you were saying, or if you were asking this question. I think there is political activism that is an expression of those testimonies, but I really don't like to see them equated with the testimony as this is what it means to be a Quaker, because your politics may be different than mine. And so even if I'm an advocate for peace and I'm against war, etc., um, I think the testimony is about more than just a political issue. Um, I don't know that I've answered your question very well, Susan, but that's um, what comes to mind at the moment. Does that lead to another or a follow-up question?
I was having trouble with my microphone. No, that's fine. Actually, what you said just at the very end gets to what I was speaking of, because I've heard the story of the early testimonies were things like not going along with hat honor and plain speech and specific outward actions. They weren't abstract concepts like peace or community. And I was, yeah, you answered my question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay.
Well, and for me, then I've thought about this some with plain dress. I understand why that was important for them, but I don't know that if I decide to dress in a particular way now, I don't know that it carries um, the same message, the same witness as it might have then, or the hat honor, or even plain speech. Which is why, for me, if I can figure out the principle it represents, then I might be able to apply it to something that's relevant in my generation. Maybe. I don't.
Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of the checklist you were talking about earlier, that, the checklist is not particularly useful to us when we're thinking about our expression of integrity. Um, and like, we see this in our budgets actually, that like, I think, well, Riley would know this, but I think Baltimore yearly meeting, one of the yearly meetings had some kind of like, protected pot of money that was just for horse troughs. And we don't ride horses to meeting anymore. So there's some pot of money that we can't touch because it's for horse troughs. And we might, reinterpret that to mean parking lots or something, but it requires a lot of work for us to reinterpret a highly specific thing on a checklist that only makes sense in the context in which people were living then. And I think it's hard for us to imagine that some of the things that are so dear to us are actually items on a checklist that, don't translate into the kinds of loving relationships, these living relationships we're having with each other. that are constantly moving and don't fit neatly on a checklist or a spreadsheet or something.
This whole relationship thing just stands out to me tonight as I mean I've heard the argument and I believe it's true that um, when families started spreading out and relationships were instead of a few families sort of intermarrying repeatedly, but building these strong connections, and then instead we move and we find some other community, but we're connected differently, and so you don't have the same investment in the success. You don't have the same commitment to work out your differences. Next thing you know, you've splintered and moved on. And I guess in thinking about the testimonies in public ministry, uh, tonight has helped bring together the relational piece of that process more than more than I've consciously thought about recently. Um, I was
Mhm.
telling Wendy earlier that even the whole idea of elders for ministers was really something I had to learn along the way because program friends didn't really do that, and
Mhm.
unprogrammed friends weren't always certain how it worked, and some have figured it out, and I think are modeling it well. But boy, there's a really important relationship that without it, the whole ministry piece is like a top that's wobbling until uh, well, maybe forever, but um, so that's been helpful out of this conversation for me tonight.
I'm here to help.
I had a question.
Yes?
My name's Lynn, and I just went to my first Quaker meeting 3 weeks ago
Hmm.
and found this on Facebook, and so here I am. Um, in these last couple minutes of conversation, I've been thinking about how it seems like Quakerism is flexible enough to evolve, and that's, in my head, maybe one of the reasons why it's stuck around so many years after, it came about, it seems, in a time of a lot of splintering and a lot of new sects of religion evolving in England. And I just wondered if you had thoughts about why Quakerism is still a relevant religion, why people still practice it now, even though it doesn't have particular, as many particular traditions as other religions do, and if maybe that was a benefit into how it's able to be a modern religion now.
Well, I think this is kind of sarcastic, but it's just me. I think some of it is because some of us are just stubborn and we won't quit. That's why we're still around. But beyond that, that may be more true than I want to know. I think Quakerism has survived for probably several reasons, but two that come to mind. It is a simpler approach to faith for people who are um, bothered by, wounded by too much doctrine, liturgy they don't understand, etc. This is a simple path to this is a simple path to worship that doesn't require a lot of bells and whistles. I mean, if you can learn to be silent, if you can learn to listen, uh, it's better when you can do it with a group, but you can do that at home by yourself. And which so it's portable and it's easy. It's low budget, but it's also powerful because um, in the silence. Well, I mean, it's if you've read the Old Testament story of Elijah, finally finding God in the sound of silence. If you listen to the point that you encounter the spirit, the divine, boy, at that level within, it's it can be transformative. It's a connection that you don't necessarily experience in a liturgy, and that's not to be negative about liturgical services. Um, so there is that. I think another reason is that it does. If you are it's attractive if you're a seeker. It's also attractive if you're a little strong-willed because um, we go easy on authority. We make space for people to think and pursue and to believe. We make space for them to express those differences. And I think, I don't know if anybody else would agree, because a lot of that worship happens in silence, those differences often are never expressed. If you never speak them out loud, you can be in a room full of people with very diverse opinions and have had a positive worship experience without realizing how unlike you are on several things. And so um, there's space for diversity that eventually has to be dealt with once relationships form and some deepening happens. But um, it's a simpler version. It's there's space for you to pursue and find your path. Um, I don't know, Wendy, what would you add to that?
Oh gosh, I was just thinking about closing because I like to end on time. I think um, I am the troublemaker of which you speak, as you know. I don't usually describe myself as strong-willed exactly. I'm very community-minded, and I think the thing that I would change about your answer, since I've now been invited to break the silence and tell you where I disagree with you, is is that I don't think. I actually don't think that we can worship alone. I think that this is inherently a communal experience. Um, and I think it's actually my commitment, not to Quakerism, but to the people of Quakerism that defines it for me. Like, I love you, Jay, and there are other people in this room that I love, and I am committed to you all. And I think that my life is a testimony to my ongoing commitment to these relationships. And that commitment has been painful for me at times, not particularly with you, though I did spend a lot of money on a steam cleaner once. But like there are people with whom it has been really difficult, and I'm still here. And I feel like it's that that makes Quakerism a vibrant, modern, I don't even know if I like the word modern, but that it's a vibrant religious community that's full of potentiality. It is that our goal is trust, our goal is love, and we fail at meeting that goal a lot, but it's still there. And I think that that's what keeps me here. It's why I haven't gone to be a pastor at a denomination that would pay me a salary and let me work a normal 9 to 5 job. Um, I'm here. I'm here working for nothing, sometimes getting yelled at by random people. And it's not because I'm a masochist, it's because I love you. And that's just the way it is.
Thank you both. Yeah.
We are at time, friends. And this is something I am, rigid about. It's on my checklist, end at 8:30. Um, so I'd like to invite us to leave if we need to leave. I'm going to sit in the space and worship for a couple of minutes if you'd like to sit with us.